Welcome, everybody. This is Avoiding the Addiction Affliction, brought to you by Westwards Consulting and the Kenosha County Substance Use Disorder Coalition. I'm Mike McGowan. Growing up around addiction doesn't protect you from addiction. Neither do drugs care about where you went to school, what you majored in, how much money you make, what you do for a living. But when you develop destructive habits, you have an opportunity to turn your life around by developing new and healthier habits. That is not only the message of our guest today, but it's his life experience as well. Dr. Jason Giles is a graduate of University of California, Berkeley. He earned a degree in molecular biology and then obtained his medical degree from University of California, Davis. Dr. Giles completed an internship in general surgery, residency in anesthesiology and pain medicine, and earned board certifications in anesthesiology and addiction medicine. He was a cardiac anesthesiologist and pain specialist before devoting his full attention to addiction medicine in 2005. He's the author of a new book, The Addiction Doctor's Manual for Behavioral Health Technicians, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do, and a previous book, which is terrific, called Outsmart Your Addiction. Welcome, Dr. Giles.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on your show, Mike.
I always like to start with the story. And so let's go backwards. Let's start with your first book, Outsmart Your Addiction. Like a lot of us, you grew up around addiction.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm a Southern California native, and there's a time of knowing that you're growing up around addiction, and there's a time before that. So I grew up around it because my dad liked to drink. I didn't know what that was when I was a kid. I knew a couple of things. I knew that if I made him a drink, I knew that if I fixed him, fortunately, he drank a very simple drink, which was gin on the rocks. It was gin
Oh,
and ice. So I could make that from a young age. And then when he was home and asked for a drink, if I made that, yeah, he was pleased. And then soon after that, he was easier to be around.
yep.
And that's what I knew about it at that time. And the other thing I know about it, I think I mentioned this in the book, which is that when he came home at night or in the morning, you could tell what kind of a day you were in for by how the keys went in the lock, right? So if there was fumbling and dropping the keys and evidence of persistent intoxication, we would say now, then we were in for good times because he was still drunk. This is back before all the crackdowns on driving drunk and so forth.
Yep.
And but if the key went in easily, then we were in for a rougher time because it had been longer since he had a drink. And it's those kinds of things that you pick up as the child growing up in an alcoholic or substance using home or a home with mental illness that you don't know that you know that until later. But looking back and when you get around other people who grew up with that, they're like, yeah, my mom, I could tell. And then they start trading stories and you realize that you're not the only one. But later, he got into a couple of those DUIs. A couple of people were interested in him being sober. He started to get interested in it himself and went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember in elementary school going with him. So there was a clubhouse not too far away from where we lived, a mile or two from where we lived. And I remember sitting in the smoke-filled rooms and seeing these folks, and they're good people. And he went to that for a while. My dad went to that for a while. He ultimately did stop drinking just right before I left the house. So that was good. And then later, when I discovered my own problem, which we can talk more about, we had that thing in common that we had been through that sequentially, and that was good. I mean, that gave our relationship a chance. We had common ground from having been through that similar experience together with getting sober. On a chronologic basis, I got sober much younger, but that has something to do with the particular substance that I chose and also that the ground was prepared. So I knew about this world a bit. I knew it wasn't the end of the world, although sometimes it felt like that would be the end of the world, not having something that you could take or drink or use. But yeah, relationships with parents in general can sometimes be tricky. And with an alcoholic father and then a mother protecting the kids, sometimes protecting him, sometimes those sort of dual relationships that go along with the codependence, that complexity. Sometimes it's hard to see the details of God's plan. All of that was on purpose. All of that was the way it was supposed to go. Much of it, as I was going through it, I wished were different. But that's one of the gifts of being in recovery and being older is seeing all the things along the way, seeing that my story, although it was unique for me, is pretty generic.
Hmm.
There's so many similarities. People get hung up on, or it's interesting, I suppose. It's probably interesting to your audience that, I was an anesthesi still, I guess, but I just don't do it anymore. Anesthesiologist, trauma, level one trauma center, hospital, high flying, transplant surgery, all the like movie and TV kind of intense stuff. But in many ways, I was still that kid from from the same house. I still had those self doubts. I still had that sense of insecurity. I still had that, if only I, and this is gets back to making the gin, if only I perform well,
Hmm.
then I can deserve to be here. And that's messed up. That's a messed up way of thinking.
Well, you talk
Very,
about it in your book, and I think that's fascinating. The parallels, you're right. Every time you talk to somebody, it's like this: substitute gin for beer in the fridge,
yep, yep.
substitute keys in the door to watching my dad's pickup truck, and our story's the same. But as you move forward, even though you grew up around it, then you get to be a teenager, and I think we divide up, don't you, into two? You have
How
the,
do you mean? What do you mean?
well, you have those group people say, I'm never going to be around it, and then some people
Oh,
go,
right.
well, I'll just use. And
I'll be careful. I was in the
yeah,
group.
yeah.
I'm not going to end up like him. I'll be careful.
And how'd
And
that work out for you?
well, here we are, right? Here
Yeah,
we are.
right.
That's how it worked out. I had to go through all of that to understand. There's an intellectual understanding. I saw a bumper sticker once that said, what would it say? That recovery is for people who been to hell, something like that. There's not, I'm trying to remember how it goes. It's like church is for people who want to go to heaven, and recovery is for people who've been to hell. I think it's something like that. Look, ostensibly on paper, based on the degrees and whatever and tests I passed and things like that, I'm allegedly supposed to be a smart guy, but that was completely worthless when
Yeah.
I said I'm going to be careful and make sure that I don't develop a problem with whatever the substance was.
I got to ask you because this is the part where I had to read it twice, and I couldn't wait to ask you this. So you're an anesthesiologist at some point, and you actually start your book with a story that's familiar to me because my dad actually died of the same operation that you were operating on when you start your
Aorta
book.
surgery?
Yes, and
Oh, wow.
but his inside there was nothing to attach it to because of his lifetime of abuse. So, and I'm sure you've
Right.
seen that. But you
Smoking.
said you deliberately set out to, maybe I'm putting this wrong. You started to experiment with the drugs that you were giving people to see what they were like.
Yes, yes, curiosity. And so that was a blind spot. For me, if you said, yeah, I don't know, we have to imagine a scenario that couldn't possibly have taken place. But let's say you and I are friends back then, and I say, Mike, I'm gonna try out these drugs in the drawer that we use for all the
Yeah.
patients just to see what they're like. You would probably have a look of horror, right? It's outrageous, that idea. And yet, this is where the smarts do me no good. And yet, that sounded to me like a very reasonable thing. I will take it even further, which is to say, who else should be experimenting with these drugs than somebody who really understands exactly how they work? Now, there's
Because,
one thing to understand exactly how they work in the textbook or in practice with giving them to other people for surgery and so forth. It's a whole different thing taking them yourself, right? So if you take them yourself, now the is sort of obvious, but the person that's going to be doing the analysis and say, "Whoa, how is this working?" And is this that person is under the influence of the drug,
mhm.
and that may be the crux of what the susceptibility to chemicals is that you make a plan, and I did this before. You make a plan. You're only going to use this much, or only on this day, or only at this time, or only with these people, or only in this circumstance. And then once the substance gets in your brain, and we take these things in order to change the way we feel, which is another way of saying change the way we think. We take these things to change the way we think, and then act surprised when the new thoughts are, hey, how about another round, right? I
Yeah.
want another pitcher. Let's go. And but of course, right? Of course, that's how the substances work is they change us from I'm under control, I'm being very thoughtful about this to what the heck, right? We're here anyway. So yes, that curiosity was the entree. And I, went through all the stuff, tried things that are not necessarily psychoactive in order to feel what epinephrine feels like and so forth. But yeah, once you get into the opiates, they
Mhm.
have their own opinion. They have something to say about what you're going to do next. And that has to do with biology. We make our own endorphins, right? We make our own opiates and we make them to deal with pain and suffering, but also they're neurotransmitters. They're chemicals that the brain uses to communicate with other parts of the body. So our engineers, our chemical engineers that made this stuff and extracted these things and put together a drug as potent as fentanyl, that was my particular cup of tea. It's so perfectly created to activate this pathway, this everything's okay, there's nothing to worry about, and no pain, right? No pain of anxiety, no pain of loss, no pain of regret. It's so perfect for that that once it's in, of course you'd want to do it again. I mean, of course you'd want to keep going. Of course you'd want to get after it because it's engineered to create those feelings. So ostensibly, analytically, this makes sense. You want the anesthesiologist to understand how this goes. And yet, the substances themselves will not let you get away with that very arm's length analysis because they get in your brain and have change plans.
Do you find yourself incredibly grateful for your supervisor at that time? Because you had support to steer you into help rather than throw you on a heap.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Peter Moore was the chairman of the department, and if it weren't for him, so I got extraordinarily lucky, not just having somebody to be there and help me through this, but there's an unknown person who a few years, not that many years before I joined the department, overdosed and died. So
Oh,
the department had an experience with another one of the residents who had lost his life behind substance use with fentanyl, was found dead at the hospital. And so that experience raised the, I don't know, worry factor or the awareness on the part of my chairman. And so he was looking for this. It became part of his pattern recognition, was looking to see. And I don't know because we never discussed it per se, but I suspect I was giving off some kind of signals. I was until that point, I was super careful, and all this activity took place after work. When I say activity, I mean the use of the drugs. But let's not kid ourselves, right? So you can't use them at all. But if you get to the point where you're using them regularly, then the next morning, and that's how the book opens, with
hmm
me
hmm
really needing some and not using it. That's the maybe worst spot to be in. And so it was obvious to him, I guess. There was some awareness that he was able to muster, like, this formerly sharp kid is now a little ragged around the edges or shiny or sweaty or goosebumpy or I don't know what. I talk about in the book. I wore a long sleeve gown, the kind that the surgeons wear, that they put their hands in and their gloves on and get tied up in the back and do surgery. Only I wore it the way you'd put a bathrobe on, which is technically backwards but looks frontwards. And so I always had that gown on, and it's not that unusual because it's chilly in the OR, and some people do that as a I don't know. It's what a lot of anesthesiologists wear is these surgeon gowns over their scrubs. But I went from never wearing one
hmm
because I'm not usually cold in the OR to always wearing one. So then maybe that was a giveaway. Whatever it was, thank God, because at one point I got a page back in pager days. This is the 90s. So I got a page from the chairman, which is weird by itself to get, paged by the boss. And so I call back and he said, the Australian guy said, not saying that you not casting any aspersions, but there's a large amount of fentanyl missing from the hospital supply. And if it's all back there, by tonight, then everything's fine. And which is of course ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. So I said, "Can I come talk to you?" Because the only way for it to be back, would be for me to be standing in there. And
hmm
I left the hospital. I got the page after I left the hospital that day. So I went to his house and he said, "I'm really happy that you are talking to me. We know what's going on and there's help for you and it's going to be okay. And then you're going to come back to the hospital when you're all done with your treatment and you're going to work here. Everybody loves you, and you're terrific at your job, and you just got this problem, and we want you to come back. Those are the words he said, but that's not what it sounded like. It sounded like, we've got you. You're never coming back here. Because I felt so low, right? I felt like I had let them down. That's what I felt like.
Well, you made it sound like you could go right back. I think people who aren't doctors don't understand this. Like you got into recovery, they got you help, but the road back to getting your
Not
status
right
back,
back. Not
right?
right
I
back.
mean, well, how long back? Because a lot of people
Three,
don't
it was three
understand that.
years. It was 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 years. 3 years. 3 year interruption. And
And how many hoops?
oh boy, yeah, boy, like LeBron level hoops. I think
Yeah.
the Ringling brothers, that many hoops. Yeah, in the very beginning, and this turns out to be classic and ordinary as well. I didn't know because it was happening to me, but in the beginning, all I wanted to do was hurry up and get better so I could better get him off my back so that I could go back and do what I was doing because okay, all right, don't use drugs. I got that. Okay, let's just have a do-over. But what I didn't know and what I realized a lot of people don't know is that the substances are not the actual problem. The substances are the late finding. They're the solution that then turns into a problem. They're the solution that then becomes its own problem. Okay, so you deal with the substances. Let's say you magically never use again. They cut out the part of you that wants to drink, right? Or they cut out the part of you that uses drugs. Not possible, but let's say it were. You still are that person. I'm still, without the substances, I'm still the guy who needs something in order to manage his feelings, to be in the world, to deal with my history, to deal with my family of origin story, to deal with all that crap. And and now without drugs, what are you going to do? We got to find a different solution because
Yep.
I couldn't live, and this is where people come in is they can't live like they were, but they don't know what to do next. And that was me. So my real problem was the way I felt about myself and the way I behaved in the world. That was my real problem. The substances were a failed solution, but I needed a new one. I needed a new solution. And that's what the hoops were. They felt like hoops, but eventually it's, I don't know, it's like any of these great superhero movies where when they're going through the part that just sucks, and then you start to get a little traction, you're like, all right, Captain America's going to make it, right? Or this is where Thor picks up the hammer. And so each one of those things. So I left, went to treatment, found there were other doctors who'd been through this. There are where I went to treatment over the 3 months that I was there, there were 100 days. There were there were 8 other anesthesiologists over that time. Now there were
Wow.
hundreds of guys in the three several hundred guys in the 3 months, but there were 8 other anesthesiologists, which seemed really important to me at the time. That someone else had been through this problem. They had a very similar story. I wasn't the only like fallen angel. I wasn't the only one who did this. They're like, oh yeah, and then I started using more often. I'm like, I started using more often. They're like, oh yeah, and then then this happened. I'm like, that's what happened to me. And you start to realize because I thought I was the only one, right? I thought nothing could help me. And then when I found something that did temporarily, I thought I couldn't talk about it. And then when everything was, I'm on this Bronco and I can't get off, who are you going to ask? Who are you going to talk to? Well, turns out that experience is also generic. And then when you hear about the beer and the vodka and the marijuana and the whatever else anybody else is doing, that turns out to be very, very, very common. Like, oh, okay, so I have that thing that several, 70 million other people have in the US, probably 2 billion people have worldwide. So I have that thing that they have. Okay, no, well, that's all right. That's actually hopeful. Maybe I'm not the only one. And then some of the other hoops were this family stuff I talked about.
Mhm.
Some of the other hoops were the belief that the book talks about, it's one of my favorite lines, that I was a victim of the delusion that I could wrest satisfaction from life if only I managed well. And that line pierced me like nothing else. Because if only I can get it all going, then I deserve to be here. And that thinking turns out to be very common in our cohort, right? Very common among the addicts and alcoholics. And the source of all of my discomfort, source of all of my pain, I don't belong here, or there's something wrong with me. That's ordinary. Everyone thinks that. I don't fit in. I'm weird at the party. I'm the new guy, whatever. Everyone has that. That's all normal. Why is she with me? She could do better. That stuff. That's not pathologic. That's normal. What's pathologic is thinking, I can fix this. That's where the problem is. Instead of saying, hey, Mike, you ever feel like you don't fit in? You're like, yeah, I feel like that all the time. Oh, wait, mean that's normal? Well, I don't know. I feel it. Okay, I don't need to fix that. I don't need to repair that feeling. I don't need to change. That's just, it passes by. I don't need a drug to fix it. So that was the big hoop, or the tiniest hoop, I guess, to get through, which is there's nothing wrong with you. There
Well,
isn't
and
anything wrong. There's
I,
nothing to fix. Stop trying to fix it.
I think that those statements lead to the thrust of your work since then, right? You clearly come down on the behavioral side. And I've spent a long, long time, my professional career working with youth, right? And
Mhm, mhm.
learning the skills to cope with your feelings, to problem solve. I mean, it's a skill. It's just repetitive
And
habits.
then it becomes a habit. How did you know how to do that? I don't know. I just do it all the time. I watched the Dodgers last night.
Oh God, I'm a
Right.
Brewer fan, so watch out.
Well, the Brewers are struggling right now, aren't they? But
Yes, yes, they
yeah,
are.
yeah, they're struggling. But the I watched the Dodgers last night, and this guy that they've got, Shohei Ohtani, he maybe the greatest player ever, certainly one of the greatest players ever. He practices a lot. He hit a
Yes.
lot of baseballs. He threw a lot of baseballs. He ran between the bases a lot, and he hits a lot of baseballs, and that's on display. So yes, it's impressive, of course. That end to that game was great for us and bad for Atlanta, but the results of it are that he is in the habit of hitting baseballs. He has talent, he has ability, he has strength, he has size, he has all those things. But that's not why he's so good. Why he's so good is he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced until he sees the game differently than somebody who hasn't played, who hasn't taken it to that depth. I was, getting close to Shohei Ohtani level good at being a drug addict. I had all this training, I had all this practice, I had all this experience, had all this expertise. And the reason I make a joke about that is that the habit becomes has its own momentum, right? It has its own momentum. If you go to the gym and if you go often enough and consistently enough, you become a gym goer. And if you're a gym goer, if you go to the gym because you go to the gym, because I don't know, I always go to the gym. If you go to the gym, you just go. And if you don't go, you don't feel right. It's not that the gym is fun. It's not that it feels good to do the exercise and go through whatever your routine is, but the habit. We're built to do things repetitively. That's what learning is, right? That's what proficiency is. So we say Shohei Ohtani's in the habit of hitting home runs. And if you think about it, well, gosh, he is. Aaron Judge is in the habit of hitting home runs. Mookie Betts is in the habit of hitting home runs. Christian Yelich, there you go, is in the habit of hitting home runs. And and so everything is habits. Our relationships are habits. Our waking routines are habits. The food we eat, and then the cumulative effects of that, whether we're healthy or not, those are habits.
I like that because even before he hits a home run, his routine is consistently the same. He wipes the bat the same way. He waits, he
Yep.
bows to the umpire the same way. So that it's second, so that the action, and to use your words, I think, I don't want, the action of then staying in recovery is just
Hmm.
a continuation of routine and habits.
Exactly. Exactly. And and so the life I have now does not look at all like the life I had back then. They're not even in the same universe in terms of what my daily schedule looks like and my internal thoughts. But that did not come easily. And that's why it's so hard to get sober, because you're dragging these automatic behaviors with you. Like,
Yep.
well, this is the time when we have a drink. Like, okay, why? We always do. Oh, that's not a really good reason to keep drinking, right? Because we always do. And so when you first learn a new skill, if you think about it, an analogy I like to think is about driving. Probably most of your listeners know how to drive or ride a bicycle. It's even simpler. When you first learn how to ride a bicycle, it's hard, right? It's hard. But what do we say? Like learning to ride a bike. Now, once you have the skill, you don't have to relearn it.
Mm-mm.
Most people don't ride a bike for long intervals. They hop back on, might be a tiny bit unsteady. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now I remember this. And then they go. So the habit of continuing to use substances to manage your feelings is also like riding a bike. It's not easy in the beginning. The alcohol burns when you first drink it. You smoke too much weed the first time you try it, or you don't know what these effects of these drugs are. It's disorienting, but you practice like the gym goer, and you get better at it, and then you have that as a skill. But the skill is not the drug use. The skill is when I feel a way I don't want to, I can take this substance and change the way I feel. And that's what addiction is. It's the habit of managing your feelings because it's a shortcut. Using the substance is a shortcut to changing your internal world, changing how you feel. And so we say, okay, stop doing that. Well, but what do I do when I need to change my internal world? How do I manage when what do you do when you don't know what to do, right? How do I feel differently? Well, I don't like the way I feel. Well, there's ways to do that. Meditation, exercise, helping others, pursuing your mission, whatever you're supposed to be doing, spiritual connection, connecting with things bigger than you, the higher power, journaling, CBT, all kinds of behavior modification things. Taking a few deep breaths will change the way you feel. Doing some push-ups will change the way you feel, right? Taking a nap will change the way you feel. There are many things that are not substances that have great follow-on benefits instead of bad follow-on problems. But you don't know how to do them yet. And you're not in the automatic habit. You're not in the automatic habit. So that's why it's so hard because you've got this old system. We're like, hey, make a new system that's even more likely to be automatic when you need to activate it. It takes time. It takes time. It takes time.
Well, that's relapse, right? That people give up on the time and
Yeah.
aren't patient enough. And how long at times do I have to wait to do it? It's learning new skills is not easy.
No, no. A friend of mine's a really famous guitar player, and he was playing this huge concert last summer, and he's playing this piece that he's played 100 times before on shows and thousands of times in practice. And he was playing somebody else's guitar, and he hit a wrong note on the guitar. And the guitar, it was somebody else's guitar because it was a special thing. And he looked down at it, and it wasn't his. And so he moved to play the next note correctly, but he hit the wrong note again. And thousands of people in the audience, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. And he was focused on the wrong notes. He was thinking about the wrong notes. Now think about it as a fraction of right notes versus wrong notes. That rounds off to zero, right? But our minds go to this, right? Like a paper cut or like a right? They get or that hole in your tongue or what in your tooth that which you keep poking at. We focus on the things that are messed up. So somebody has a wicked drug problem or a wicked drinking problem, they get sober and they slip back a couple of times over years. I mean, on a percentage basis, we would say that's pretty amazing, right? Pretty amazing. We don't have this is what I one of the things that if I were doing AA over, if I were creating it from scratch, if I were Bill
Oh,
Wilson,
watch out
I would have
here.
I would have a third category because there's the newcomer. That's the person who's new to AA. There's the AA member slash old timer who's got it, who's got it. But what about the person who comes for some time, slips back to the old habit, comes back to AA? What do we do with that person? If they're in the very beginning, we're like, try it again. That's a few weeks. Oh, you got a chip, 90 days. Okay, try it again, try it again. But if you've got somebody who's sober a long time and they whatever have a bad day or decide to get curious or try something that gets out of hand or who knows, right? They don't say, hey, I need a little help here, and they keep to themselves and they have a relapse and don't die and get back, okay, well, actually I don't want to do that. I want to be sober. It still doesn't work. I want to be sober. What do we do with that guy? We call him a newcomer, right? We say you're a newcomer, but that's not really fair. It's not exactly right. So we need I don't know what it is. I don't have a suggestion, but we need some other way to regard this spectrum of life that sometimes with our eye on the ball, it's a little easier. And sometimes we go into a slump. And sometimes we recognize, right? It's the first time we strike out that may be the beginning of the slump, or it might not be. So we don't know, oh gosh, actually, yeah, this thing's changed and my kids moved out and whatever, or we had a third kid and whatever, the life changed, or we moved cities or had a new job, or I got, fired from my HHS job, or other things happen, right? Life happens. And I went to a different meeting, or I stopped going, or and then we looking back, oh, that's when this began. It's habits. It's habits. So we need another category. Well, I don't know. Maybe your listeners will come up with what that is. It's not a newcomer. That's not fair to say these 20 years or these 8 years or these 4 years that you lived under a different set of rules and then slid back into the old set of rules briefly or for a period of time. You're not really new.
No, they counted.
They counted.
I-
And the reason I think it matters is if we don't count those, well, what about what is this new period of sobriety then? Does that not count also? So it's I don't know, it's time, like time in grade or something. We need some other way to recognize the fact. And you hear guys
well, and
say, well, I used to have 8 years and now I'm back in another 6 years. So I would have had four, it's a problem. I would have had 14 anyhow.
well, I want to let you go with this because I think for the people who listen to this who work in the field and your new book is designed for them, we don't always speak the same language. So,
Mm,
if we're practitioners and you're, the drug and alcohol therapist is talking to the psychologist who's talking to the psychiatrist, I have this conversation with a good friend of mine. We're not even in the same field on the same page when it comes to language, working as a team together. And
yeah.
sometimes we argue over these little things or big things.
Yeah, well, harm reduction. That's my favorite one right now. Harm reduction. What's that? Light beer or just half a joint? Is that harm reduction? Or there's a doc. I was at a conference last year and she's prescribing fentanyl to people with a history of opiate use disorder or fentanyl use disorder. She's prescribing it under the banner of harm reduction. And I can't get behind that. I don't think that reduces harm because what we're playing for is something bigger, right? We're playing for not just dealing with the particular substance use disorder, but dealing, as we were talking about earlier, with the underlying situation. Why? What's a nice guy like you doing in a rehab like this? How did you wind up here? And that's the real problem. That's the actual problem. The longer we keep people or allow people or facilitate people to be separate from taking responsibility for their own lives, the longer they're going to be miserable. So I mean that's my message is take responsibility. You don't take responsibility for your dad. That's not your fault, right? You're not responsible for the avalanche. You're not responsible for the tides or the seasons, but you are responsible for your personal conduct. I saw this. I thought it was this. I did this. It's just that. It doesn't mean you're supposed to be perfect all the time or get it right all the time. But that's ironically, the freedom is in personal responsibility. That's when you become an adult, is when you stop looking for someone else to be responsible for your life. So that language of taking responsibility, I don't know. It's difficult in the therapy world also. So I work with some great therapists, great clinicians. We have, a big telemedicine company that helps lots of people, dozens of treatment centers where we're doing the medical care. And I want the patients to complete treatment successfully and stay sober forever. That's what I want for them. And sometimes I wonder if the field shares my ambitions. Sometimes there's a bit of a dirty secret in the field, which is keep coming back, right?
Mm.
And, and we're starting to catch on to that idea. We're starting to understand that value-based care is the catchphrase for let's reward the helpers, let's reward the industry for people staying sober rather than coming back to refix the same broken arm, so to speak, over and over. I don't know. I think paradoxically saying you can help yourself. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Recovery doesn't do those things for you. They lay it out, but you have to take personal responsibility for your own life and go, I don't want to live like this anymore. I'm tired of feeling this way. I want to have a life that I'm happy in and proud of. and can share with others, a life that's not of secrecy, a life that's not of self-defeat. And so, but you have to take responsibility to do it. You have to go, yeah, no, if you're overweight, you're overweight. If you're smoking cigarettes and you keep smoking cigarettes, who else is responsible? It's not advertising. Okay, advertising makes it more likely you're smoke. It's not your peers. Okay, if you're around smokers, you're probably get more likely to smoke. But you're responsible for getting away from the advertising. You're responsible for choosing your peer group. It always comes back to you. Always comes back to you. So I think that is an optimistic and the most loving position you can take, right? Of course you need help. Of course you need the bicycle to ride to learn how to ride a bicycle because we forget, we get off track. But you're responsible for recognizing that you're off track. You're responsible for getting back on track. And I think ultimately, and this is why I guess I'm still in rehab, you're ultimately responsible for helping others. That's for me, back to your top of your question, the gift that I got by getting into this life, I haven't paid it back yet.
Mm.
I still feel ahead. I still feel like I have work to do too because of my family, because of my health, because of my sanity, because of the beautiful things that I've been able to observe. I think, and because of how I feel about myself. I mean, I sleep at night. I have peace. I'm not under the lash of John Barleycorn or anything else. I don't have that in my life anymore. So what's that worth? I mean, how can I say thank you to Dr. Moore who helped me with the confrontation and all the people in between, all the therapists, all the counselors, all the helpers, and most of all, and this is what my dedication in the book is to my patients because that's who I learn the most from, right? I learn all these facets of the same problem. Oh, that's another way of saying the same thing. Oh, that's a fresh take on. I haven't thought of it that way before, but yeah, I see how it's still a habit problem. You still have to take responsibility. You still have to. So, the last thing I'll say about that is this, which is the serenity prayer. Most of your listeners probably know the serenity prayer, right?
Yes.
This the serenity prayer is the greatest filing system ever devised. So the serenity prayer has two drawers. It has the things I can change and the things I can't. Most things are in the second drawer, right? The past, anyone else, the world, the tides, as we mentioned. And the stuff that's in that skinny little folder is your attitude and your behavior. Want my own attitude and my own behavior. That's it. So I can change my attitude, I can change what I do, and that's turns out all I have to do. If I do that, it's magic. The world will change. Your world will change if you change your attitude.
Outstanding. Those of you who listen know that we have links to Dr. Giles' books, terrific books, as well as some of your socials and other podcasts that you've done. We encourage you to listen whenever you're able. We encourage you to get support wherever you can. Thanks for listening. Be safe and your choices, your habits, your life.